In the earliest periods of recorded history, long before the rise of the Imperium of Man, the Orks were already a widespread force across the stars. Their presence predates many of the galaxy's now extinct civilizations, including the Elder Empire's Golden Age and the rise of the Necrontyr. Though accounts of their creation are fragmentary and often contradictory, the most accepted truth stems from the remnants of an ancient species known as the Old Ones. These beings were intellectual leaders of the Ork race, engineered during the Age of Technology by the mysterious and highly advanced Old Ones. Designed as a form of organic weaponry, Orks were not a product of evolution, but of purpose. They were born into the universe not to grow a culture or develop naturally, but to wage unending war. They were seeded across countless worlds, hardwired to fight, spread, and survive. The precise method of their dispersal remains unknown, but archaeological remains confirm Orkoid structures on planets that no longer support life. The Ork body is an amalgamation of fungal and animal biology. Standing typically between 6 and 10 feet in height, their physiology is composed of dense, corded muscle layered beneath thick, green skin. They possess no distinguishable fat storage and burn energy at incredible rates, fed by a diet composed of anything digestible, including flesh, metal, or industrial waste. Their bones are hyperdense, capable of withstanding massive impact trauma, and their teeth grow rapidly, regenerating continuously and often used as a form of currency. Orks reproduce through spores released naturally by their bodies, which embed into the surrounding environment and eventually spawn not only more Orks, but also the supporting ecosystem of Gretchens, Snotlings, and Squigs. This decentralized and self-replicating reproductive system renders them nearly impossible to fully exterminate. Attempts by various factions to cleanse planets of Orks have consistently failed due to lingering spore contamination that reboots their ecosystem after a few years, sometimes even decades. The military structure of the Orks is intentionally chaotic, but not without its own logic. Warfare is their cultural centerpiece, their spiritual purpose, and their entertainment. Ork society thrives on combat, and martial prowess is the single most respected trait within their hierarchy. While they do not maintain formal military ranks in the conventional sense, leadership naturally falls to the strongest, loudest, or most violent among them. These warlords, known as Warbosses, rise through continual physical dominance, or by accumulating enough followers, loot, or vehicles to assert their authority. Beneath them are subordinate nobs who enforce the Warbosses' will and lead smaller groups into battle. Ork tactics rarely follow structured planning. Instead, they operate through brute force, overwhelming numbers, and unpredictable behaviours that often disrupt more conventional opponents. Despite their crude appearance, Ork weaponry is often remarkably effective, empowered not just by physical design, but also by a latent psychic field generated by Orks in large numbers. This phenomenon, often called the Waaagh field, enables weapons and machines that logically should not function to operate as intended, simply because Orks believe they will. Recruitment is non-existent in the traditional sense. Orks do not need to be born or enlisted, they simply grow, fight, and attract others through displays of strength. A single war boss on a planet can eventually lead to a global infestation within decades if left unchecked. As Orks gather, they naturally drift into larger groups called war bands. These bands vary greatly in size, ranging from a few dozen to millions, and when multiple war bands coalesce under a particularly charismatic or brutal leader, they form a massive invasion known as a Waaagh. These events are not just military campaigns but cultural eruptions, galactic-scale migrations of destruction, fought purely for the sake of battle itself. The cause behind a Waaagh is never material or strategic. It is simply a surge of instinctual violence that pulls Orks together, driven by momentum and mass bloodlust. Socially, Orks are governed not by rules or law, but by instinct and brute strength. Their society is simultaneously anarchic and rigid, where dominance decides every interaction. Orks do not build communities in the human sense. Instead, they occupy space through scavenging, looting, and construction of ramshackle fortresses, often piled high with stolen technology and debris. Civilian roles barely exist. Every Ork is born a fighter, and while some may gravitate toward roles like mech boys or pain boys, builders and medics respectively, these are still just extensions of their war-making lifestyle. Gretchen and Snotlings, the smaller subspecies in Orkoid ecology, often fulfill more passive or technical roles, but even they participate in battle when needed. Ork ethics are entirely absent by Imperial standards. There is no remorse, diplomacy, or empathy. Their moral system is binary. Strength equals right, weakness equals irrelevance. Leadership varies significantly between Ork cultures. Some are ruled by single dominant Warbosses who maintain brutal control, while others fragment into dozens of competing knobs, constantly fighting each other in ritualized brawls. The presence of mechs, weird boys, and other specialist castes introduces another layer of functional complexity. Mechs are inventors, weaponsmiths, and vehicle builders. Their creations often defy logical understanding and range from crude slug throwers to mechanized war engines the size of buildings. Weird boys are latent psychers who channel the psychic energy of surrounding orcs into devastating bursts of Waaagh-charged power, though their minds are unstable and often suffer catastrophic overloads. Pain boys serve as battlefield surgeons, although their methods lean more toward experimentation than care. These specialist castes are not formal institutions but emerge organically among the orcs, often growing into respected or feared figures within a warband. Ork technology appears haphazard, but functions under specific rules derived from both mechanical engineering and psychic reality. Their vehicles, aircraft, and weapons are built from scrap, yet capable of extraordinary durability and firepower. The designs typically involve oversized components, glaring colours, especially red, which orcs believe makes things go faster, and randomized attachments. Despite their seeming randomness, there is often a hidden efficiency to their designs, enabled by the collective belief that the machines will work. The more orcs believe in a function, the more likely it is to occur, even against all laws of physics. This makes orc technology a paradox, simultaneously crude and miraculous, held together by willpower as much as by bolts or welds. Culturally, orcs view conflict as both a purpose and a philosophy. They do not wage war to conquer, but because it is the natural state of existence. An orc who is not fighting is either preparing to fight or recovering so he can fight again. Their rituals, if any can be described as such, include constant sparring, looting, and competitive displays of violence. Even death is treated with apathy or humour. Fallen orcs are often stripped of gear and thrown into piles, while their spores ensure new replacements soon emerge. There is no afterlife or spiritual concern, just the perpetual cycle of battle. Some orcs, however, follow vague cults or tendencies, gravitating toward particular styles of warfare. These loose affiliations have grown into de facto clans, such as the Death Skulls, who focus on looting and scavenging, or the Evil Suns, obsessed with speed. Each clan has its own minor customs, colours and technologies, but all remain unified by the central orc creed: fight, loot, repeat. Famous orc figures are scattered across history, with certain warbosses rising to galaxy-wide notoriety. Gazkul Maguruk Thraka is perhaps the most infamous, a strategic and terrifyingly intelligent warboss who has orchestrated multiple sector-wide ways. His campaigns against the Imperium have led to significant planetary losses and destabilization of entire subsectors. Another notable figure is Nazdregog Utgrub, known for deploying teleportation technologies in surprisingly strategic ways. These individuals stand apart not by wisdom or political cunning, but by sheer battlefield impact and the number of followers they amass. Orc fame is not built through legacy, but through ongoing success in war. Even among themselves, orcs are not truly unified. Clans, warbands, and regions often devolve into internal skirmishes. However, their shared instinct ensures that when a war truly begins, all infighting is suspended. The psychic resonance among large groups of orcs amplifies their aggression and coordination, allowing what was previously a rabble to become a coherent force of planetary-level threat. This field, while invisible and unquantifiable by most standards, is acknowledged even by the Adeptus Mechanicus, who have documented unexplained phenomena surrounding orc populations. Tools that should not work begin to function. Weapons with no power source fire. Vehicles operate beyond known engineering constraints. These are not miracles. They are products of mass belief, manifested through war. This biological, cultural, and technological ecosystem makes the orcs both fascinating and terrifying to any structured civilization. Their biology ensures survival, their culture guarantees expansion. Their technology, unpredictable as it is, remains effective enough to destabilize even the most fortified Imperial holdings. They do not seek peace or resolution. They do not negotiate or retreat in shame. They only escalate. A single orc is dangerous. A planet of orcs is a catastrophe waiting to happen. The behavioural instincts of the orcs form a cornerstone of their persistence in the galaxy. They are not driven by abstract goals, strategic doctrines, or long-term planning. Instead, they operate on deeply embedded impulses coded into their very biology: aggression, expansion, and dominance. Every orc, from the smallest snotling to the largest warboss, experiences a primal urge to fight. Combat is not merely encouraged within their society, it is chemically and neurologically reinforced. Studies conducted by the Adeptus biologists on captured orcoid samples suggest heightened adrenal and dopaminergic responses to physical violence, reinforcing their enjoyment of battle through positive neurological feedback. These responses are not triggered by survival stress, as with most species, but by the opportunity for conflict itself, regardless of context or consequence. In the absence of external enemies, orcs will readily turn on one another. These internal fights rarely threaten the warband's overall stability, and in many cases they serve as social regulation. Disputes are resolved not through discourse or arbitration, but by immediate brawls where the winner assumes command, ownership, or respect. This practice applies across all levels of orc society and ensures a constantly evolving leadership structure based entirely on physical power and momentary supremacy. This system, while appearing volatile, creates a natural meritocracy of violence that reinforces their core values. Strength is truth, power is law, leadership is proven in real time through direct confrontation. Some orc populations manifest ritualistic behaviours, although these are instinctual rather than ceremonial in the human sense. War paint, for example, is commonly applied before major battles, with certain clans adopting consistent patterns and symbols. These markings often have practical purposes: intimidation, identification, or camouflage, but they also reinforce group identity. Orcs may claim that particular colours or shapes enhance their combat effectiveness. Blue is considered lucky, while red is thought to increase speed. These beliefs, supported by the werefield, become self-fulfilling. When enough orcs believe that red vehicles go faster, those vehicles do go faster, at least in a measurable if not fully understood sense. While most orcs follow the general path of combat, some specialise into roles that support the wider warband ecosystem. Mech boys are engineers by instinct, drawn to building, modifying, and often exploding machinery. They do not learn through structured training. Instead, they are born with genetic memory fragments, encoded engineering knowledge passed down through spore memory. This allows them to instinctively understand how to construct complex engines, weapons, or even spacecraft, despite having no formal schematics or infrastructure. Their workshops are chaotic places filled with sparks, roaring engines, and half-functional death traps, yet the output is effective more often than not. Mechs frequently compete with one another, racing to build bigger, louder, or more unstable inventions in a kind of arms race that pushes orc technological evolution forward in bursts of innovation and disaster. Pain boys fulfill a similar niche within the medical realm. They perform battlefield surgeries, cybernetic enhancements, and brutal revivals of wounded orcs using tools that often appear stolen from both imperial and alien sources. Like mechs, pain boys operate through instinctive knowledge, cutting into their patients with no anesthesia and little concern for consent. The process is brutal but effective. Orcs show a remarkable tolerance for pain and physical trauma, often returning to battle minutes after receiving major surgery. Some pain boys experiment with bodily modifications, replacing limbs with blades or mechanical parts purely for aesthetic or violent enhancement. These modifications are not seen as dehumanizing or shameful. They are badges of honor, showcasing both the surgeon's skill and the patient's resilience. Weird boys represent one of the most unstable orc castes. They are psychers, capable of channeling the Waaagh field into tangible effects such as lightning blasts, teleportation, or psychic explosions. However, they do not control this power willingly. The psychic energy of surrounding orcs builds up within them uncontrollably, and when the charge reaches a critical threshold it must be released, often with explosive results. Weird boys are both revered and feared within warbands. If managed properly, they can devastate enemy forces with psychic storms. If left unchecked, they may incinerate their own allies in a burst of uncontrolled energy. Orc warbands often assign a Minder or Norb to control the weird boy, usually by keeping them angry enough to channel the power without succumbing to overload. It is not uncommon to see a weird boy chained or muzzled between battles, only to be unleashed when violence becomes necessary. These internal divisions between castes are not strict or bureaucratic. There are no written codes or organisational charts within Orc society. Instead, these roles are fluid expressions of genetic predisposition. Orcs simply become what they feel suited for. A particularly curious orc with an eye for engines will eventually start building things and be recognised as a mech. A combat-obsessed orc who grows unnaturally large and brutal may rise to be a war boss. There is no voting, ceremony or formal selection. Recognition is achieved by doing, and roles are validated through success and repetition. This approach makes Orc society resilient and adaptable. It can shift instantly to meet new challenges without bureaucratic inertia or ideological conflict. Clans and warbands make up the larger structure of Orc civilization. Each clan embodies a general theme or cultural bent, shaped by shared habits and tendencies rather than laws or customs. The Goths are brutally straightforward, favouring close combat, massive warbosses, and a preference for black armour. The Evil Sons obsess over speed, constructing fast vehicles and decorating themselves in bright red paint. The Death Skulls believe in luck and scavenging, painting themselves blue and often stealing from their own allies. The Bad Moons are rich, growing teeth faster than other orcs and often possessing the best gear due to their immense buying power. Each clan maintains its own unique blend of behaviour, tactics, and technological focus, yet all remain part of the unified orc archetype: aggressive, expanding, and disorderly. Warbands, by contrast, are smaller, more immediate groups centred around a particular leader. These can be formed from a single clan, or include a mix of multiple. The warband reflects the personality and preferences of its warboss. Some may focus on vehicle warfare, others on infantry charges, others on bizarre experiments with looted alien tech. Over time, a particularly dominant warboss may absorb other warbands into a growing Waaagh, forming a planetary or even interstellar threat. These migrations of violence are fluid. They grow, fragment, and recoalesce based on shifting loyalties and victories. When a warboss falls, his warband may scatter or implode in civil war, until a new leader rises from the carnage to rebuild it. In terms of ritual and cultural behaviour, Orcs exhibit surprising consistency despite their chaotic nature. They observe basic social cues, such as acknowledging a warboss's authority, participating in group chants, and engaging in rhythmic stomping or drumming before battle. These behaviours are not codified into religious or ceremonial doctrines, but they serve to strengthen group cohesion and stimulate the war field. Sound, in particular, plays a key role in Orc combat readiness. Loud noises, music, engine revs, and shouting all enhance their collective energy. A warband preparing for battle may resemble a riotous concert: drums, war cries, stomping feet, and the roar of vehicles blending into a cacophony of psychic build-up. By the time they engage the enemy, the Orcs are at a frenzied psychological peak, fueled by noise, belief, and proximity to violence. Language among the Orcs is crude but functional. It consists of heavily accented Low Gothic mixed with guttural sounds and simplified grammar. Orc speech is direct, emotional, and often violent in tone. Arguments are resolved with fists or guns before reaching philosophical depths. Despite this, Orcs maintain names, slang, and catchphrases that help define identity within a warband. Warbosses often rename themselves after victories or take on exaggerated titles. Vehicles are named and painted with slogans. Looted objects are repurposed and renamed to reflect new Orc ownership. These practices form a kind of cultural graffiti, scrawled across the galaxy in steel, smoke, and green flesh. Among the most defining features of Orc culture is their capacity to build war machines that defy logic, precision, or conventional craftsmanship. These vehicles are not assembled in factories or designed with blueprints. Instead, they're created in sprawling mechboy workshops under conditions of chaos and improvisation. Despite the crude nature of their tools and materials, the resulting war engines are often formidable, both in durability and battlefield impact. Common vehicles include trucks, fast open-topped transports that carry mobs into the thick of combat, and battle wagons, which are heavily armoured, weapon-laden transports capable of breaking enemy lines through sheer mass and firepower. These machines are powered by scavenged fuel sources or hybridized engines, often combining looted alien tech with barely understood combustion systems. The driving philosophy behind Ork engineering is simple. If it looks dangerous, sounds loud, and moves fast, then it's ready for war. Aircraft are equally chaotic. Ork flyers range from small Defcopters to massive Dakka jets, burner bombers, and blitzer bombers. These aerial platforms are built from whatever scrap is available and often decorated with spinning blades, oversized guns, and unnecessary fins. Ork pilots are selected not for skill, but for their recklessness and obsession with speed. Once airborne, these machines are difficult to predict, often changing direction erratically or diving into enemy formations with no concern for survival. Strangely, Ork aircraft outperform many expectations. This performance is attributed to both the sheer number of flyers deployed and the psychic belief that, if it flies, it fights. Within the Waaagh field, enough shared belief can keep these unstable machines aloft and firing, even if their engines are visibly sparking or held together with wires and hope. On the ground, Ork weaponry reflects the same crude brilliance. The most common firearm is the shooter, a rapid-firing, often oversized gun that varies in function and accuracy between individuals. These are usually crafted by mechs using scrap metal, looted components, and spare ammunition magazines, with little regard for precision or repeatability. The slugger is a simpler, pistol-sized version used in close quarters, often paired with a brutal melee weapon such as a chopper or power claw. Ork melee combat is where their physiology becomes most apparent. Few species can match the sheer brutality of a charging Ork mob. With muscular strength exceeding most human baselines by several orders of magnitude, Orks wield their weapons with reckless force, often cleaving through armor, vehicles, or fortified barricades using raw momentum. Some Ork mechs develop an obsession with building larger and more absurd machines, culminating in constructs like the Stomper and the Gargant. Stompers are walking fortresses bristling with cannons, flamethrowers, and massive blades, operated by a full crew of Orks shouting conflicting orders and firing wildly. These war machines can be dozens of meters tall, powered by scrap fusion engines and psychic enthusiasm. Gargants, even larger, resemble the walking god machines of the Imperium's Titan legions, though they lack the elegant control and refined design of those sacred constructs. Built to mimic the image of the Ork gods Gork and Mork, entities representing brutal cunning and cunning brutality respectively, these machines are monuments to Ork dominance and chaos. Each one is unique, a massive clanking nightmare of exposed gears, oil smoke, and screaming green faces. The Ork approach to warfare, while seemingly disorganized, displays a kind of emergent pattern recognition. During prolonged conflicts, Orks begin to adapt their strategies based on experience. A warband that faces stiff-armoured resistance may return with more tank busters, specialists in explosive weaponry. One that loses air superiority may suddenly construct dozens of Dakka jets. This adaptation is not coordinated through high command or strategic planning. It simply happens as individual Orks act on impulse and instinct, subconsciously driving the evolution of their warband's capabilities. The larger and longer a conflict continues, the more refined Ork tactics can become, though never in a traditional or predictable form. Among the more specialised divisions of Ork military society are the Commandos. These Orks display a rare and unusual trait among their kind: stealth. Commandos operate in small teams, often painting their bodies in dark colours, using crude camouflage and employing rudimentary infiltration tactics. They sabotage enemy supply lines, plant explosives, or assassinate priority targets, though their definition of stealth is often exaggerated. Many commandos cannot resist shouting or causing explosions, believing themselves to be sneaky even while triggering alarms. Nonetheless, they represent a unique counterpoint to standard Ork behaviour, and demonstrate the full range of behavioural variants possible within their gene-coded society. Squigs, a vital component of the Ork ecosystem, fill dozens of roles. These creatures are bioengineered products of Ork spore ecology, ranging in size and function from small explosive variants to massive riding beasts. Some squigs are edible and serve as a food source. Others act as mobile mines, chomping explosives and charging into enemy lines. Hair squigs are worn like living wigs. Attack squigs are used in combat, strapped to Ork arms or thrown at enemies. The diversity of squig species is vast, shaped by the local environment and the density of orc spores. Many are bred or modified by pain boys or mechs, contributing to the warband's efficiency and unpredictability. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of orc culture is its resilience. No matter how many times they are defeated, orcs return. Their spore-based biology ensures that even after catastrophic planetary bombardment, the orc presence may return within years, emerging from deep underground or dormant biocolonies. Their structures regrow, their mobs reassemble, and their cycles of violence resume with minimal need for external input. This makes them a permanent threat to every galactic power. Unlike the Eldar, they require no psychic webway or soul preservation. Unlike humans, they need no supply chains or birth cycles. They are self-contained, regenerative, and functionally immortal on a species level. Killing them individually does nothing to halt the greater tide. Even on planets with harsh atmospheres or limited resources, orcs adapt. They modify their physiology, loot local technology, and reshape the landscape into war zones. Their instinct to fight is so strong that it reshapes their entire environment. Battlescapes become permanent features. Forts, vehicle tracks, crashed ships, and junk piles form living cities of metal and noise. A planet occupied by orcs quickly loses any sense of natural geography, replaced by a metallic wasteland where everything moves, explodes, or bleeds green. This tenacity, combined with their psychic unpredictability and overwhelming numbers, makes the orcs the galaxy's most infectious military force. They do not need diplomacy. They do not require ideology. They do not claim worlds for empire or legacy. They arrive. They fight. They remain. That is the full extent of their strategic doctrine. And for over 60 million years, it has worked. The earliest confirmed documentation of orc activity within the archives of the Adeptus Administratum dates back to Millennia 22, during the closing years of the Dark Age of technology. Though references to orcoid entities appear in fragmented logs as far back as Millennia 18, these reports are either corrupted or classified as non-verifiable due to data degradation and the collapse of interstellar record coherence during the Age of Strife. It was during this fragmented era that orc migrations first began to intersect with early human expansion routes. Records recovered from pre-imperial colonies on distant rimwood sectors describe green-skinned xenoforms engaging in mass surface-level assaults, often without discernible motive or demand. These engagements were typically dismissed as pirate attacks or misclassified as non-sentient xenospecies until consistent biometrics and behavioral patterns emerged across dozens of disconnected systems. Following the establishment of the Imperium of Man during the Great Crusade, the Mechanicum of Mars formally identified the orcs as a widespread threat. In the early years of the Crusade, the 4th Legion encountered numerous orc-held worlds throughout the northern galactic fringe, including the Ghoul stars and the edges of Segmentum Obscurus. These early campaigns revealed both the persistence and unpredictability of orc resistance. Entire planetary systems, once assumed uninhabited or cleared, were found to be infested with deeply entrenched orc populations. Spore regrowth was not yet fully understood, leading to repeated resurgences even after the extermination of surface life. As the Great Crusade progressed, the Imperium adopted increasingly aggressive protocols when encountering orc-held systems. These included full planetary purges, orbital bombardments, and sustained campaigns by multiple Astartes legions and solar auxiliar cohorts. The Ulanor Crusade remains the most thoroughly recorded orc campaign of the pre-Horus Heresy era. In Millennia 30, year 860, the Imperium launched a massive military operation against the Orc Empire established in the Ulanor sector. This empire, ruled by an exceptionally powerful warboss known as Urlak-Urg, had resisted all previous Imperial attempts at subjugation. The Ulanor sector represented one of the largest consolidated orc holdings in recorded history up to that point. The campaign's political consequence was equally significant. It was during the aftermath of the Ulanor triumph that the Emperor officially elevated Horus Lupercal to the rank of War Master. The symbolic victory over the Orcs was used to unify the Imperial war machine under a single strategic command. This moment is frequently cited in Administratum records as a pivot point in Imperial history, both as a demonstration of the Orc threat and as the beginning of the Imperium's internal fracturing that would lead to the Horus Heresy. Following the heresy, the Imperium's ability to mount large-scale xenopurges diminished substantially. Resources were diverted toward reconstruction and internal policing. As a result, orc infestations once thought contained began to resurface. One of the most illustrative examples occurred in the Sharadon sector during Millennia 34, when multiple Forge worlds came under siege from newly emergent orc warbands. Mechanicus records from Rizza and Tigris detail the sudden appearance of millions of orcs, supported by a vast armada of scrap ships and asteroid fortresses. The Forge world of Griffon 3 Ost mounted a protracted defence lasting 34 standard years, during which over 600 Skitarii regiments were deployed and expended. Despite the destruction of several orc-held moons, the Mechanicus was ultimately forced to abandon the adjacent systems to preserve its remaining Forge worlds. By Millennia 36, Administratum clerks noted a shift in orc patterns of aggression. Rather than striking isolated frontier worlds, orc warbands began targeting active shipping lanes and established hive systems. This strategic evolution was not attributed to centralized orc planning, but rather to the increasing size of wares that allowed for more ambitious and far-reaching campaigns. The world of Armageddon became the most studied case of this behavioral shift. First invaded by the Orks in Millennia 36, year 357, under the Warboss the Beast, the planet survived its initial assault only to be attacked again on 2 more occasions, each one more devastating than the last. The Second War for Armageddon, beginning in Millennia 41, year 941, and the Third War in Millennia 41, year 998, are documented in minute detail by both Administratum and Mechanicus scribes. The latter involved nearly every major Imperial faction, including the Astra Militarum multiple Astartes chapters and over 30 Titan maniples. Despite immense Imperial losses, the Orks were repelled but not exterminated. Their presence remains in the planet's outer wastes to this day. The Adeptus Mechanicus has provided extensive technical documentation on Orc construction practices, having recovered and dissected thousands of captured vehicles and weapons. Mechanicus logs consistently confirm that Orc technology violates standard engineering principles. Internal combustion systems are frequently non-functional by known laws of physics, with engines running despite lack of compression, ignition, or fuel efficiency. Power sources often exhibit undefined plasma behavior, and magnetic field generators have been recorded functioning without external energy input. This phenomenon was further studied during the Golgotha incursion of Millennia 41, year 681. Mechanicus explorator teams recovered a downed Orc fortress vehicle, the size of a hive spire. Analysis of its core systems revealed nearly 80% of internal components to be inert scrap, yet the vehicle had functioned for over 2 planetary cycles. Signal records indicated the presence of a dominant warboss using the construct as a mobile command center. It had successfully coordinated attacks across 5 separate continents, despite lacking conventional communication systems or power relays. This evidence was presented to the Fabricator General and subsequently sealed within the Archmagus vaults deemed too anomalous for widespread dissemination. Throughout the 41st millennium, the Administratum has maintained continuous threat-level monitoring of Orc activities across all 5 segmenti. High-concentration zones include the Octarius sector, the Sharadon Expanse, and the Armageddon subsector. Notably, the Octarius War saw the Orcs engage not just the Imperium, but also a fully emergent hive fleet of the Tyranids. This conflict created a closed-loop war zone where both xenos species inflicted mutual attrition. In a rare strategic decision, the Inquisition sanctioned the perpetuation of the conflict, allowing the Orcs and Tyranids to deplete each other, while the Imperium maintained a standoff perimeter. Reports from the Department of Minatorum continue to monitor the region, although attempts to fully contain either faction have proven ineffective. The frequency of recorded Waaghs has steadily increased over the past 3 millennia. Administratum cartographs have mapped over 200 distinct Waaagh vectors in the last 800 years, many of which overlap or fragment into smaller sub-wars. It is not uncommon for a single warboss to launch a campaign that fractures into dozens of smaller invasions, as his warband grows and splinters. This decentralized structure makes Orc expansion difficult to predict or counter. Their fleets move erratically, often jumping into warp space without navigational aids or plotted destinations. Many reappear weeks, years, or decades later in unrelated sectors, having raided unknown systems during transit. The greatest modern example of Orc consolidation remains Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka. First identified in Millennia 41, year 941, Ghazghkull has led multiple large-scale campaigns across the Armageddon subsector and beyond. His command of Ork forces displays a level of strategic intent previously unseen among his kind. Administratum records describe him as a charismatic, brutal war boss, capable of uniting disparate warbands under a single Waaagh with planetary-scale consequences. The full extent of his empire remains unknown, though it is suspected to span dozens of systems. Despite multiple assassination attempts and full-scale military engagements, Ghazghkull continues to evade permanent elimination. His campaigns are now classified as Priority Omega by both the High Lords of Terra and the Ordo Xenos. Administratum projections predict that Ork activity will remain a constant destabilizing factor for the next several millennia. Unlike other Xenos threats such as the Necrons or Tyranids, Orks do not follow cyclical or evolutionary models. Their aggression is not seasonal or population-based, it is perpetual. Their growth is self-sustaining, and their numbers are reinforced not through birth rates, but through spontaneous spore generation. This renders most traditional containment strategies obsolete. For every Ork warband destroyed, another will inevitably rise, fed by spores in the soil, built from the bones of former mobs, or sparked into being by conflict itself. The Imperium has not found a permanent solution. The current strategy, as documented in Tactica Imperialis revisions, is simple. Contain outbreaks, redirect their aggression where possible, and delay full-scale Waaghs through localized extermination. The Imperium does not view the Orks as a solvable problem. They are not an enemy to be defeated, but a condition to be endured, a wound in the galaxy that cannot be closed, only bandaged. One of the most studied Ork engagements of the post-heresy era occurred in the Golgotha system in Millennia 40, year 987. Located in Segmentum Tempestus, the Forge World Golgotha became a priority target due to its vast promethium stockpiles and mechanized production sectors. Initial Ork incursions were limited to asteroid-based raiders, but by year 989, full warband formations began making planetfall. Administratum logs confirm that a large-scale Waaagh erupted under the command of Warboss Scarfang, a figure known for deploying tracked vehicles and oversized artillery in high-density concentrations. Within 2 years, Ork forces had overrun 3 out of 5 surface hive foundries, forcing the Mechanicus to activate multiple plasma reactors to prevent them from being looted. The campaign escalated into one of the bloodiest wars of its century. Mechanicus Skitarii regiments, supported by Legio Metallica Titans, held the line at the cost of nearly total attrition. Golgotha was eventually deemed a strategic loss by Millennia 40, year 991. Remaining forces enacted exterminatus-level scouring operations in the equatorial regions and abandoned the planet. Despite the effort, Ork spore readings remained active. By the beginning of Millennia 41, Orks had re-established themselves in the southern hemisphere, using scrap from destroyed Titan shells as structural support for new fortress compounds. Mechanicus entries classify Golgotha as a class-red infestation zone, where re-engagement is considered high risk and unlikely to yield permanent results. Another critical Ork war zone emerged in the Ark's Gap, a corridor of semi-charted void space along the edge of Segmentum Solar. During Millennia 41, year 71, a series of distress signals were intercepted from mining outposts along the outer belt. Explorator fleets investigating the disruption found the entire region overrun by mobile Ork asteroid bases. These constructs, known as rocks, are solid rock formations converted into crude voidcraft. Rocks contain rudimentary propulsion systems, Ork-constructed atmosphere pockets, and dozens of hangars filled with aircraft and boarding pods. The rocks are directed not through conventional navigation systems, but by crude Ork instinct and intership signaling, often achieved through loudspeakers or visual icons visible in space. Mechanicus logs from the Raukos survey detail the seizure of 3 entire gas mining stations by Ork void fleets using these rocks. The installations were torn apart, their reactor cores scavenged for unknown uses, and their crew left adrift. By year 073, the Orks had weaponized one of the rocks into a functioning gravitational slingshot platform capable of launching assault craft toward inner planets. While Imperial Navy attempts to intercept the rocks were partially successful, the damage was significant. The Mechanicus filed an emergency revision to the Lex Mechanicus Naval Codex to include planetary-scale asteroid interception strategies. Rocks are now catalogued as autonomous Xenos capital vessels, though their internal logic remains poorly understood. Further evidence of Ork adaptability was recorded during the Eridani conflict in Millennia 41, year 273. Located in Segmentum Ultima, the Eridani sector had experienced minimal xenos activity for several centuries. However, a dormant spore population, likely the remnants of a pre-Crusade Ork infestation, reactivated following seismic activity in the crust of Eridani Secundus. Within 23 standard months, Ork numbers increased from localized tribal mobs to a full planetary presence. The Mechanicus dispatched several biocogitator teams to study the reproductive cycle and growth patterns. Findings confirm that subcrustal Ork spores can remain viable for over 20,000 years if isolated from environmental disruption. The spores became active due to geothermal shifts, which provided optimal heat and mineral density for mass regrowth. Attempts to exterminate the Orks on Eridani Secundus through virus bombing proved only partially effective. While surface populations were destroyed, post-bombing surveillance picked up regrowth signals within 6 standard months. The second wave of infestation produced larger, more aggressive Orks, likely due to accelerated gestation from nutrient-saturated soil. Subsequent attempts at eradication transitioned from extermination to quarantine. The sector was declared a sealed war zone by year 277. Administratum records indicate that the Eridani system remains contested, with Imperial forces conducting annual bombardments to limit Ork expansion beyond planetary orbit. Millennia 41, year 378, saw the rise of an unusually technologically advanced Ork warband under the leadership of Warboss Nazdreg Ug-Urdgrub. Operating in the Golgotha Rift, Nazdreg was among the first Ork leaders documented using teleportation technology for mass troop movements. Mechanicus analysis confirmed that the devices used bore similarity to ancient Eldar phase shift systems, although retrofitted with industrial scrap and powered by unstable plasma cores. The Orks were able to project boarding parties directly into orbiting Imperial Navy vessels, bypassing standard void combat entirely. The resulting chaos led to the destruction of 2 cruisers and the disabling of a battleship within 72 hours of first contact. Nazdreg's forces were eventually repelled by a combined response from the Black Templars and elements of the Imperial Navy, but his escape marked the start of a growing trend in Ork wargear complexity. Subsequent raids by other Ork factions began displaying crude forms of teleportation, warp fluctuation engines and semi-sentient vehicle AIs, none of which should logically function under normal technological parameters. Mechanicus savants at Styges 8 concluded that Nazdreg may have either captured xenos tech from unidentified sources or developed a mech society highly concentrated in latent psychic enhancement. Regardless, the Administratum elevated the Nazdreg warband to the Threat Omega Index, and any reports bearing his glyph are to be forwarded directly to the Ordo Xenos. Among the most devastating Ork campaigns in recent memory is the War for Armageddon's third and final phase, which began in Millennia 41, year 988. This war brought the largest concentration of Ork forces ever recorded in the Segmentum, led by Guskhul Mag Uruk Thraka. The war began with a planet-wide assault from multiple vectors, including orbital insertions, ground landings, and subterranean tunnel advances. The Orks had amassed an army so vast that even with the combined might of the Steel Legion, multiple Astartes chapters, and over 30 Titan maniples, the Imperial forces were barely able to contain the invasion. Mechanicus records of the conflict provide technical insight into Ork logistics during prolonged engagements. Analysis of captured wargear confirmed the presence of mobile mech workshops embedded within forward operating camps. These workshops continually salvaged both Ork and Imperial wreckage to maintain and even upgrade weapons mid-campaign. This allowed the Orks to maintain equipment cycles indefinitely without requiring external supply chains. Several frontline Ork vehicles were discovered with the armor plating sourced from Lehman Russ hulls, and power cells rigged using captured Baneblade reactors. The Ork war effort adapted continuously based on battlefield conditions, even deploying mecha suits resembling scaled-down titans known as Def Dreads and Killer Cannons. These units were not mass-produced but individually assembled by roaming mechs using materials scavenged on site. Administratum projections during the war estimated Ork numbers at over 100 million across the surface of Armageddon. Despite the extreme measures used to repel them, including citywide firestorms, orbital strikes and targeted virus deployments, the Ork presence could not be fully eliminated. While Ghazghkull eventually withdrew his main forces to prepare for new Waaghs elsewhere, Ork populations remain active in the equatorial jungles and dead zones. Armageddon has since been placed under permanent military lockdown. A formal declaration was issued in Millennia 42, Year 003, stating that Ork regrowth on the planet is considered inevitable, and recurring extermination sweeps will be maintained indefinitely. These engagements represent only a fraction of the Administratum's accumulated documentation on Ork campaigns. From Hive-world sieges to Forge-world raids, Ork invasions follow patterns of exponential growth, localized adaptation, and sudden mass cohesion into wear formations. Their timing remains unpredictable. The triggers are unclear. What is certain, as recorded in every major conflict from Ullanor to Armageddon, is that Orks never arrive quietly, never retreat cleanly, and never leave a world unchanged. While most Ork incursions follow the expected patterns of surface invasion and industrial repurposing, a number of unusual cases remain preserved in the sealed annals of the Administratum's Ordo Logistica and Adeptus Mechanicus's Divisio Historica. These accounts, while lesser known than major campaigns such as Armageddon or Ullanor, provide critical insight into the adaptability and persistence of Ork warbands. In Millennia 40, Year 219, the mining world of Stenthal Firfirth suffered an infrastructure collapse following a seismic event in its northern hemisphere. Emergency Mechanicus servitor teams were dispatched to maintain atmospheric stability. Upon arrival, they encountered entrenched Ork tunnel systems built directly beneath the primary mining shaft. No records had indicated any prior Ork contact in the region. Investigation revealed that Ork spores had likely lain dormant for centuries within mineral veins, becoming active only once mining operations reached deep subsurface caverns. Within 4 standard months, the Orks had established a crude subterranean city powered by salvaged mining equipment and supported by geothermal exhaust systems. The Warband's mech boys had repurposed atmospheric scrubbers into explosive gas chambers, creating kill zones throughout the tunnels. Surface forces dispatched by the Astra Militarum were unable to advance past the 4th substrata due to the unpredictable and suicidal resistance patterns of the tunnel-dwelling Orks. After 6 months of stalemated subterranean warfare, orbital bombardment was authorized. Even after 2 full-scale strikes, seismic sensors continued to detect low-level Ork activity beneath the crust. Stenthal Firth was subsequently quarantined and marked as an environmental hazard. In Millennia 41, Year 132, a rogue Forge world known as Dresmere reported a shortwave xeno signal, transmitting crude binary sequences across a restricted astropathic frequency. Upon triangulation, the signal was identified as originating from an Ork-constructed orbital platform in the Threnus Belt. The platform, designated Object 9 in Mechanicus records, was over 200 kilometers in length and composed entirely of fused asteroid fragments, shipwrecks, and unknown material. The object emitted sustained electromagnetic pulses, causing interference with local Mechanicus data streams and disrupting long-range machine rituals. A recon team recovered fragments from the platform before being destroyed by an automated defense mechanism that ejected high-density scrap projectiles at relativistic speeds. Within the platform's core, the team recorded glyphs consistent with those of the Death Skulls clan, along with dozens of makeshift antennae connected to psionically active scrap idols. The Mechanicus theorized that the structure was a kind of Ork astropathic amplifier, potentially designed to broadcast war resonance through the void. No further investigation was permitted. The station was destroyed by a focused lance array in Millennia 41, Year 135. The discovery, however, led to revised detection protocols across Segmentum Pacificus, with Mechanicus ships now instructed to scan for passive Ork signal bleed in all non-classified sectors. The Orks' presence on feral and death worlds has also proven persistent despite harsh environmental conditions. One such case involved the planet Krongar, a volcanic wasteland first surveyed in Millennia 36 and dismissed as uninhabitable due to extreme atmospheric instability and constant tectonic shifts. In Millennia 41, Year 451, however, a survey ship belonging to the Voss Pattern Fleet detected primitive life signals from the planet's equator. Upon descent, they discovered a functioning Ork settlement built directly into the sides of an active caldera. The structures were fused from heat-tempered alloys and powered by redirected lava flows. The local orcs, described as unusually resistant to heat and chemical burns, had adapted biologically to the planet's toxicity. Some were observed to have developed hardened dermal plating and blister-resistant physiology. Despite these adaptations, the warband exhibited standard behaviour: immediate aggression, rapid construction of weapon emplacements, and constant infighting. The Mechanicus initiated a long-range study using orbital pict scanners. Over the next 11 years, the Orks expanded their lava settlements into a chain of walking fortress beasts powered by geothermal exhaust vents. These structures, part mechanical and part living ecosystem, migrated across the planet's unstable crust. They became self-contained orc hives, breeding spores, manufacturing weaponry, and launching skyward scrap missiles in random directions. Krongar was placed under permanent observation and interdiction. It remains one of the few known examples of an orc warband achieving full self-sufficiency on a death world without external inputs. By Millennia 41, the increasing frequency of small-scale orc conflicts became impossible to track in full. Segmentum Militarum officers began categorizing orc activity into tiers of significance. Green flickers referred to localized banditry or raiding patterns. Waaagh-class Primaris designated growing warbands with potential interstellar cohesion. Waaagh-class Ultima was reserved for planetary-scale invasions already underway. Administratum reporting procedures were revised to require predictive modelling of orc behaviour based on trade route intersections, abandoned forge systems, or quarantine world stability. One such predictive success occurred in the Lethe cluster in year 817, where Adeptus Cartologus analysts forecasted a possible orc resurgence due to elevated radiation activity in a previously cleared system. The forecast was accurate. Within 4 months, orc warbands emerged from subgravitational bunkers and attempted to overrun the nearby outpost of Lethe Primus. The system was secured, but the success demonstrated that orc outbreaks could, with sufficient data, be partially anticipated. A final major event documented by both the Administratum and the Mechanicus before the onset of the Noctis Eterna was the Ascraeus Convergence in Millennia 41, year 999. Located in a minor subsector near the edge of Segmentum Obscurus, Ascraeus Tertius was a largely unimportant agricultural world until it came under attack from an unknown orc armada. The initial invasion force was small, no more than 50,000, but their rapid adaptation to the planet's terrain created a cascading series of ecological collapse events. The orcs dammed rivers using living squig constructs, rerouted wind patterns with scrap turbines, and began reshaping the soil with sonic ploughs dragged by armoured squigosaurs. These activities disrupted local fauna, destabilised hive food chains, and triggered a continent-wide desertification process within 2 planetary cycles. Imperial intervention was delayed due to warp storms. By the time the Astra Militarum arrived, the Orks had converted Ascraeus into a semi-mobile warworld, with multiple landmass regions moving on reinforced tank treads. Administratum cartographers declared the planet ecologically unsalvageable. Mechanicus dataseers requested permission to study the resulting biosphere for possible insight into Ork geotectonic manipulation. The request was denied. The world was sealed by Exterminatus decree within the same year. As the Imperium entered the era Indomitus, the Administratum ceased attempting to maintain complete accounting of all Ork activity. The deployment of the Indomitus Crusade and the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum introduced new logistical and psychic constraints that rendered wide-area Ork monitoring unreliable. Current Mechanicus doctrine maintains that Ork presence is now assumed in all unmonitored regions of the galaxy, unless proven otherwise. Their infestations may no longer be detectable by standard auspex. Their spores may already lie dormant on tens of thousands of planets. Their fleets, even when seemingly destroyed, may resurface without warp signature logs or void trace. The modern stance, expressed in the Tactica Extrema Addendum, is that Orks cannot be fully defeated, only disrupted. In the final Administratum Surveyor Report of Millennia 41, penned by Segmentum Ultima Overseer Balthus Groner, a line was inserted into the appendix and later approved for doctrinal use across all Ork response units. When faced with green, respond in kind. If it bleeds, kill it twice. If it burns, burn it deeper. If it builds, leave nothing standing. If it speaks, silence it. If it moves, do not stop. This quote, now engraved on the banners of dozens of Astra Militarum regiments, represents the only consistent lesson drawn from 10,000 years of Ork engagement. Do not hesitate, for wherever the Orks remain, they will rise again. The Ordo Xenos maintains a secure archive beneath the fortress vaults of Bellerophon Null, a classified inquisitorial installation located in the corewood shadow of Segmentum Obscurus. Within these subcrypts lie data scrolls and psychic recordings that diverge sharply from the common understanding of Ork behaviour. Whereas the Adeptus Administratum focuses on scale and documentation, and the Mechanicus seeks reproducible patterns, the Inquisition seeks truth, however disquieting. Their records suggest that Orks, as a species, exhibit traits not adequately explained by current imperial biological theory, nor by any confirmed xenos evolutionary model. The first significant deviation appears in the inquisitorial dissections carried out on the world of Ultanar Prime in Millennia 36, following the capture of a dormant Ork spore mass deep beneath the planet's mantle. This event was not the result of combat, but rather of routine mineral core sampling. Once extracted and isolated, the spore mass exhibited signs of active memory imprinting. Under the scrutiny of Ordo Xenos Magos biologists, neural-like filaments were discovered within the structure, filaments that responded to external stimuli in patterns mirroring known Ork tactical data. In plain terms, the dormant mass remembered battle formations, glyph markings, and terrain reactions. This suggested a kind of genetic memory transmission, far more advanced than previously documented. The findings were sealed and reclassified under the Lex Prohibita, with the final report stating only that Ork spores may possess psionic imprint potential. The overseeing Magos biologist was relocated under protective custody, and the data slate was never entered into any Mechanicus registry. In Millennia 37, the Inquisition launched Project Brazen Mirror, an unauthorized infiltration initiative in the Sycorax Nebula. A detachment of Deathwatch operatives embedded within an Ork-infested system were ordered not to engage, but to observe. Over 21 standard months, they recorded the internal behavioural cycles of a growing Ork colony established on the corpse of a fallen rogue trader void station. The report, declassified only in partial form, contains several anomalies. Chief among them is the discovery of organised planning that exceeded reactive mob behaviour. The Orks had assigned fixed labour roles, established predictable shift cycles, and even implemented architectural consistency in the design of their scrap towers. Most disturbingly, these designs were not haphazard. Internal corridors followed geometric patterns resembling Imperial manufactoria, a feature impossible for the Orks to copy unless they had seen similar layouts before. Further recordings from the mission included audio logs of Ork glyph chants resembling low Gothic phrasing. Some glyphs, when translated by linguistic cogitators, mimicked archaic Imperial litanies, phrases once thought lost during the Age of Strife. The Order Hereticus was alerted and classified the phenomenon as a potential case of mimetic bleed-through. One theory posits that Orks may subconsciously absorb fragments of past conflicts, including architectural memory, combat doctrine, and linguistic patterns from civilizations they have annihilated. In this interpretation, every Ork Waaagh is a walking graveyard of cultural detritus, reassembled by instinct rather than design. No concrete explanation was reached. The Deathwatch team was withdrawn. The system was scoured clean by exterminatus 5 months later. The Inquisition's most tightly guarded findings involve the phenomenon known only as the Green Echo. This term first appeared in fragmented astropathic relay pulses intercepted in the aftermath of the death of Liston 6, a fortress world that suffered instantaneous shutdown of all electronic systems during an Ork invasion in Millennia 41, year 122. Survivors reported not just combat losses, but total collapse of psychic clarity. Astropaths on-world became unresponsive. Choirs lost alignment. The sky was said to shimmer with a dull green haze that occluded vision and drowned sound beneath a low hum. These accounts were initially dismissed as battlefield stress. However, when similar reports emerged from 2 unrelated campaigns, in Brachus Reach and Silneen, the Ordo Xenos reclassified the event. Under closer scrutiny, it was determined that the Green Echo may represent a nonlinear psychic event triggered by mass Waaagh energy, reaching a saturation point. Rather than simply increasing Ork combat strength, this state may warp reality itself, warp lensing, visual mirage distortion, and spontaneous equipment failure all increase during high-density Ork engagements. Mechanicus Logici have described instances of data stream corruption originating from no known transmission source, code rewritten in glyph syntax, replacing binary text mid-sentence. One inquisitor theorized that in extreme cases the Waaagh field becomes not merely an aura, but a low-tier warp entity, a resonant echo of collective will that mimics demonic bleed without containing a demon. If true, this would place Orks not outside the warp, but actively shaping it. There is also the matter of Ork convergence. Inquisitorial agents embedded in the Venatus border zone observed the arrival of 3 separate Ork warbands within one planetary cycle, all hailing from different subsectors and with no established communication lines. Each warband adjusted course mid-transit and redirected toward the same unremarkable moon. No warp beacon was detected, no signal was emitted. All 3 arrived simultaneously and immediately began brawling for dominance. When questioned, captured Orks gave conflicting responses, stating they were called, following the noise, or feeling the pull. Subsequent scans detected no psychic interference from known sources. The theory was introduced that Orks may possess a form of instinctual triangulation, part psychic, part subconscious, that allows them to track one another without technological aid. If confirmed, this would explain the sudden formation of some Waaghs with no traceable cause or communication. Perhaps the most disquieting Inquisition report is the still classified Xenocrypt G11, authored during a deep void operation near the Halo stars. This document, accessible only to alpha-level Inquisitors, records the existence of a non-hostile Ork individual encountered aboard a drifting vessel of unknown origin. This Ork, though fully mature and heavily muscled, displayed no aggressive tendencies. It made no threats, wielded no weapons, and responded to spoken low Gothic with grammatically accurate, if simplified, responses. The Ork did not initiate violence when provoked. It was eventually sedated and examined by a joint Ordo Xenos and biologist team. Scans confirmed standard Ork genetic structure, including latent spore capacity. However, its neural configuration contained atypical neuron density in regions associated with empathy, planning, and verbal articulation. During the interrogation, the Ork stated it had seen something big in the void and that the fight was too big even for me. It expressed awareness of the Emperor, not as an object of worship, but as the biggest boss who don't yell. When questioned further, the Ork spoke of dreams that were not its own, colours that didn't belong, and voices in the dark speaking with Gork's voice but Mork's words. The implications were not recorded. The individual was terminated via plasma sterilisation and the chamber incinerated. All witnesses signed permanent silence protocols. Xenocrypt G11 remains one of the only official Inquisition documents to suggest that Ork consciousness may extend beyond simplistic rage, that under unknown conditions they may awaken. This possibility remains heretical. All official documentation classifies Orks as genetically determined aggressors, bioengineered in the distant past by the old ones of the Krork epoch. However, suppressed Inquisition theories posit that the Krork may not have vanished, but rather collapsed inward, leaving only the echo of a once structured species, now broken into instinct and chaos. If so, the Orks are not a mistake. They are a fragment, and what they are remembering is not war, but empire. In Millennia 38, a Deathwatch kill team assigned to the Ordo Xenos recovered a data cache from a derelict Eldar craftworld fragment found in the Omera Drift. Within the encrypted memory shards were indirect references to Orks labelled only as Echoes of the Storm. The language used by the Eldari suggested a grudging respect. Orks were not described merely as beasts, but as recurring pollutions of form, likened to reality glitches within the natural weave of the galaxy. The Eldari referred to them as half-born immortals, remnants of a forgotten war not between races but between intentions. While not verified by the Inquisition, these terms were annotated with high interest by Inquisitor Tylus Varn, who proposed that the Eldar perception of Orks may tie them to ancient warp-affecting technologies lost before the war in heaven. His request to pursue further contact with craft-world intelligence was denied. He was later found dead under uncertain circumstances during a separate investigation into Tzeentch cults in the Dolmen Verge. Further field contact with non-human factions adds weight to the Inquisition's suspicion that Orks are not simply widespread, but foundational. A Tau watercast diplomat, captured and interrogated after the failed Third Sphere expansion in the Dalith cluster, relayed that even among the technologically driven Tau, Orks are treated with mythic-level caution. The diplomat's testimony described multiple failed attempts to integrate Ork behaviour into simulations for predictive conflict modelling. Every attempt collapsed into feedback loops, because Ork combat actions exhibited neither randomness nor rationality, but a third behaviour category, which Tau xenopsychologists labelled as non-linear pattern aggression. The term describes entities whose tactical decisions are simultaneously chaotic and self-reinforcing, creating forward motion not by outmanoeuvring the enemy, but by collapsing the enemy's logic grid altogether. These observations match closely with inquisitorial logs from the Skara incident in Millennia 41, Year 512. During this event, Ordo Malleus Inquisitor Draxil Thula oversaw the containment of a multi-factional battle in the orbital graveyard of Skara 9. The system had become host to a Necron reawakening node, which simultaneously drew Ork scavenger fleets, Tau observation drones, and a minor Genestealer cult embedded within the local Labour population. While the Necrons eliminated both the cult and the Tau presence with precision, the Orks adapted in real time. Observations from Inquisition servo-skulls indicated that the Orks, upon first contact with Necron units, immediately constructed new weapon rigs mimicking Gauss energy dispersal. These crude analogues somehow produced near-identical results, vaporizing Necron chassis despite having no coherent energy source. The Orks appeared to learn purely through observation and brute mimicry. More disturbingly, a captured mech was recorded speaking to its weapon as though it believed it contained the power of the Necron enemy. It said, "It zogged one of them before, it'll zog another." The Inquisition has long struggled to reconcile such incidents with the known limitations of Ork intelligence. The Skara incident prompted the creation of Lexicodex Omega-0, a restricted document that outlines the possibility that Orks interact with technology through belief projection rather than technical knowledge. While the Mechanicus has proposed similar hypotheses, the Inquisition's interpretation is more severe, that Orks are not merely instinctual engineers, but untrained reality editors, able to impose function upon form without mediation. This theory, if accepted, would place them closer to warp-capable races than material ones, with the key distinction being that their psychic manipulation is passive, not ritualistic. They alter probability not through invocation, but through expectation. Further psychic probing caused the Tyranid to emit stress pheromones and finally collapse into neurological implosion. The implication drawn by the interrogating Psyker was that Orks exist outside of Tyranid biological classification models. Where the hive mind normally adapts by identifying prey through biopattern recognition, it may not perceive Orks as stable enough to target coherently. This suggests that Orks' self-regulating evolutionary chaos may create a field of unpredictability that even the synaptic calculus of the Tyranids cannot interpret. Ordo-Xenos analysts propose that this could make Orks the only species in the galaxy functionally immune to Tyranid adaptive dominance, provided Ork numbers remain unconsolidated enough to avoid strategic harvesting. Orks have also crossed paths with the Drukhari of Comora, though most records are speculative, collected from broken webway shards or recorded by psychic survivors with compromised minds. Inquisitorial whisper teams embedded near known webway breaches have reported rare accounts of Ork spores forming infestations within the deepest void sectors of the webway itself. Though impossible to verify with physical evidence, these accounts describe primitive Ork tribes emerging in places unlinked to any natural planetary vector. These Orks are not part of a Waaagh, nor do they follow typical clan structures. They are described instead as feral echoes, seemingly trapped in stasis or repeating fractured cycles of conflict across the same narrow caverns of space. Theories arising from these observations hint that Ork spores may not only be able to survive in the webway, but may have existed there longer than previously known. It is even speculated by a few radical inquisitors that Orks could have been seeded through the webway in ancient times, either by the Krork themselves or as a byproduct of their final war. If Orks are not native to the Materium but were distributed across its fabric via lost corridors of the Old Ones or their enemies, then their omnipresence across the galaxy is not incidental, it is deliberate. The final major field documentation within this phase of the Inquisition's Ork research occurred during the Gathol repression. In Millennia 41, year 991, the Ordo Xenos staged a false ecclesiarchy purge on the hive world of Gathal Ultima, in order to mask a classified orc resurgence in the lower underhives. The native populace had not reported any greenskin sightings. However, unexplained collapses in civ infrastructure, missing cogitator banks, and psychic echoes pointed to deeper interference. Upon deployment, Inquisition kill teams discovered that the Orks had not entered the world from orbit or through warp jump. Instead, they had grown within the planet's crust. No ships, no impact craters, no surface landings. Further genetic sequencing of the Orks uncovered unique mycoid strains unlike those recorded in previous campaigns. These strains were harder to burn, more resistant to radiation, and exhibited a dormant state up to 120 Terran years. Inquisitor Carol Thane proposed that these spores may have originated from an earlier Ork presence, erased from memory during the Age of Apostasy. They were simply biding time, nested inside forgotten fault lines and collapsed vaults. If true, then Orks may already exist on hundreds of worlds, believed free of xenos activity, buried, waiting, and fully capable of reactivation through mere environmental fluctuation. The Gathal operation ended with a full subhive incineration. No record of the Ork presence was added to the system's history files. These encounters, dispersed across thousands of years and dozens of sectors, cannot be easily explained by the standard Imperial doctrine that paints Orks as crude, dim-witted savages. While they certainly exhibit those traits, the more the Inquisition observes, the clearer it becomes. Those traits are not limits, they are masks. Whether remnants of a fallen empire, weapons shaped by long-dead hands, or a form of organic chaos embedded into the framework of the galaxy, the Orks defy conclusion. They do not merely exist, they linger, not as an error of biology, but as a certainty of outcome. In the private holdings of Inquisitor Hestral Vordrix, now presumed lost during the Yillithan collapse, exists a shattered data slab marked only with a hexadecimal date, corresponding to Millennia 32, year 004. The file was partially restored using Mechanicus cipher keys and neural imprint tracing. What remains of it references an event labelled the Silence Before, a historical anomaly in which entire Ork populations across 3 subsectors ceased all movement, construction, and internal conflict for 9 standard days. No causality was recorded, no warp events were detected, Vox channels were silent. Kill teams dispatched to observe found warbands sitting in stillness, some mid-battle posture, others staring at the sky. Upon the 10th day, all Orks resumed motion as though no interruption had occurred. Vordrix annotated the event as a possible sync crash, wherein the collective Waaagh field underwent a temporary collapse or reset. No similar event has been confirmed since. This idea that the Orks are not a random xenos species but part of a distributed quasi-conscious field effect has become increasingly common in the most forbidden research circles. The Inquisition Xenogenetic Division has pursued a suppressed theory known internally as the network hypothesis. According to internal simulations run at forbidden cogitator speeds, Orks may operate not just via individual will, but through emergent behaviour akin to data swarm logic. Each Ork is an output node, each mech a compiler, each Waaagh a system-wide operation. The results may not follow human logic, but they are coherent in their own alien syntax. This hypothesis would explain certain documented anomalies: Ork ships gravitating towards seemingly unrelated battles, spontaneous invention of identical glyphs across warbands with no contact, and simultaneous tactical shifts observed on opposite sides of a star cluster. The Inquisition cannot confirm any direct communication medium. There are no visible signals, psychic links, or navigational tags, but if the Waaagh field is in fact a kind of reactive network, then every Ork may be a fragment of a single distributed organism. In Millennia 41, year 933, a rogue inquisitor known as Threnn Daskell, later executed by his peers, proposed a radical extrapolation of this theory. His final sealed dossier argued that the Waaagh field might not be generated by Orks, but be an independent force using Orks as vectors. In his analysis, the field predates modern Ork biology. He suggested that Orks were not the cause of the field, but the result, a spontaneous evolutionary adaptation created by galactic conditions to anchor and disperse excess psychic energy. In his own words, "We have always believed Orks are a species. We have not considered they may be a safety valve." His theory was rejected, his notes were declared heretical, but fragments of his research continue to circulate in Alpha Clearance Inquisition networks, particularly among those investigating warp resonance and planetary anomalies. It is now unofficially accepted by some agents that Ork presence on a world may reduce overall warp instability in the short term, not through psychic shielding, but by bleeding chaotic potential into structured violence. In this interpretation, Orks are not tools of the warp, they are insulation against it. This theory gained traction following the Rassenthal incident in Millennia 42, Year 06. An Ordo-Chronos investigation into a warp-time fracture discovered a localized region where Orks had seemingly reversed temporal entropy across a 25-kilometer radius. The Ork warband involved had not survived, but the space they left behind, ruins of metal, blood, and dust, was temporarily locked. Buildings burned for weeks without consuming fuel. Blood splatter remained airborne, unmoving. Upon exit from the field, inquisitorial tech priests found their chronometers misaligned by up to 3 days. Multiple Inquisition specialists confirmed no demonic presence, no psychic saturation, no necron stasis tech. The only variable present before the event had been a high-density Ork scrap fortress, now destroyed. Internal models of the event yielded no explanation. One inquisitorial savant submitted an unverified claim that the Orks may have temporarily overwritten local causality through force of belief, believing hard enough in a good scrap to freeze the reality where that battle had happened. The claim was buried. And still, the evidence piles. In systems where Orks fight for too long, the veil between probability and certainty thins, patterns degrade, reality bends. Inquisitor Velet Cyrn, during her work cataloguing glyph structures on Goron 3, found repeating mathematical curves embedded in mechboy graffiti that matched long-abandoned equations from pre-imperial cosmology. The glyphs had not been learned. They had emerged from instinct. She later disappeared. The Orks' resilience, their absurd engineering, their capacity for synchronization, all point to a deeper order than the Imperium is willing to admit. The Inquisition has terminated entire research teams for suggesting that Orks are more than they appear, for suggesting that their violence is not chaos, but another kind of law, a self-perpetuating physics of war. Not a mistake of xenobiology, but a solution to it. Final conclusions are rare in Inquisition records. The data is too sparse, the risk of psychic corruption too great. But one line appears across multiple black vaults, etched not as report, but as warning. Do not let them think too long. What this means is unknown. Whether it refers to the Orks or to those who study them remains ambiguous. But it appears in every sealed file where the Orks linger too long and start to change.